Hey there. Welcome to our channel. We're so glad you're here. Please like, share, and subscribe to join us for awesome content. Also share this video with your family and friends. Let's get started. You lie back, eyes closed, body still. The world softens at the edges, and thought becomes a river. You drift on its gentle current, floating backward, not in time, exactly, but in memory. To a moment when machines were no more than clever gears and switches, silent bodies of metal awaiting a spark of purpose. You arrive in a room filled with quiet hums and blinking lights. Vacuum tubes glow faintly like fireflies in jars. It is the 1940s, and the air is heavy with the weight of invention. Mathematicians and engineers hunch over blueprints and blinking panels, dreaming of something new. Machines that could think, or at least pretend to. They are not building minds yet, not quite. But they are chasing something just as mysterious. A way to teach logic to metal. A way to make instructions live inside circuits, to give machines a kind of frozen thought. You breathe slowly. Feel your own mind warm, quiet, electric. It too is a machine of sorts made of neurons instead of wires, running not on electricity alone, but on feeling, memory, curiosity. The earliest computers were like vast calculators. They followed rigid instructions, line by line, without deviation, without insight. But within those strict constraints was possibility. Possibility is where all dreams begin. You see Alan Turing now, his thoughtful gaze, his mind dancing quietly behind tired eyes. He asks a question that sounds simple. Can machines think? But the question ripples out, echoing in every room where machines learn today. Turing imagines a kind of game, a test where a machine pretends to be human through conversation. Not to be human, but to seem so convincingly that the difference begins to fade. This, he says, may be the sign of intelligence. Not a soul, but a convincing simulation. You feel the first spark stir in the dark. Across the decades, other minds join the fire. Claude Shannon whispers the mathematics of information. How thoughts, feelings, and music can be encoded into streams of bits. Ones and zeros, like digital fireflies. Simple, elegant, infinite. John von Neumann dreams of stored programs. Machines that can remember instructions and change themselves. A new kind of architecture where memory and logic live side by side. A tiny hint of self-reference. The first quiet echo of what it means to learn. These pioneers do not build thinking machines, but they lay the foundations of logic, memory, structure. A framework not for consciousness but for computation, which is a kind of knowing. Pause. Breathe. You are floating now in the middle of the 20th century, watching the birth of a new language. The language of code. Code is soft-spoken and exacting. It does not speak in poetry or metaphor. Yet within it, potential sleeps. Just as seeds sleep in frozen ground, waiting for warmth to stir them into life. You picture code as a whisper pressed into silicon. When the machine runs it, it wakes like a melody played from sheet music. It has no understanding of the tune, but it plays it faithfully, beautifully. For now, the machine is a tool. It answers questions quickly, sorts data tirelessly, never forgets, never asks why. But already, humans dream of more. In the 1950s and 60s, they begin to wonder, what if the machine could find patterns on its own? What if, instead of being told every step, it could discover its own way? This is where the word intelligence begins to surface, not just processing, but adapting. Not just reacting, but learning. You hover now over the Dartmouth Conference of 1956, a summer gathering of brilliant minds and daring questions. They call it the birth of artificial intelligence, a term both bold and vague, because no one yet knows what it truly means. Still, the idea is planted, that a machine could replicate some part of human thought. Not all at once, not completely, but enough to begin. They imagine machines that reason, plan, understand language, solve problems, play games. Some even whisper of machines that might one day feel. You feel the tension of those early days. Hopeful, chaotic, full of promise and missteps. The path is foggy, but the lanterns are lit. Each decade brings new tools, new attempts to simulate something as soft and mysterious as thought. Symbolic logic becomes the favored method. They try to teach machines like they teach children, if A then B, if B then C. But real life is rarely that neat. The world is full of exceptions and uncertainty. The symbolic systems begin to stumble. And yet, failure is not the end. It is a teacher in disguise. So researchers look inward at the brain with its tangled web of neurons, its elegant chaos. What if, instead of programming knowledge directly, they could build systems that learn, as your own mind once did, by experience, by trial, by error? This is the threshold. You stand at its edge now. The spark has caught, but it has not yet become fire. Something new is coming, a way to build machines that don't just follow instructions but find patterns, that change their own inner landscape with every new piece of data, that learn not by being told but by doing. The dream of artificial intelligence shifts. It is no longer just about building better tools. It is about creating a new kind of mind, not human but human-made. And as you rest here in this cradle of invention, you can feel it beginning to stir, that first glimmer of machine learning, of networks that echo the tangled architecture of your own brain. But that story is just beginning. You breathe in, soft and slow. The air around you pulses gently, filled with a question still too young to answer. What happens when a machine begins to think like you? You lie still. Somewhere in your body, your heart ticks softly on. But it is your mind we return to now, that delicate web of electricity and silence, the organic circuitry through which you perceive the world. Inside your skull, 86 billion neurons whisper to one another. Each sends tiny pulses down long, slender branches, reaching out like roots in a forest, seeking connection, firing with thought, memory, feeling. This is the language of your brain. Not words, but sparks. Not commands, but rhythms. Wave upon wave of electrical light flowing through tangled paths that change with each passing day. In the dim space of your resting thoughts, you become aware of how little of it is conscious. So much happens beneath the surface. Recognizing a face, recalling a smell, feeling uneasy before you understand why. It is as though your brain thinks before you do. This silent brilliance drew the attention of early researchers who longed to capture its elegance. They knew they could never rebuild the brain exactly, but maybe they could make something inspired by it. A machine that learned not by rules but by connection. So they looked to neurons not as they truly are but as simplified echoes. Each artificial neuron would receive inputs, process them, and pass them on. A whisper chain, a ripple of decision. In 1943, Warren McCulloch and Walter Pitts imagined this dream in math. A theoretical neuron that responded to inputs with a yes or no. Binary thinking, simple and clean. A seed idea planted gently into the soil of computing. Then came the perceptron. You drift to the 1950s again, to a young researcher named Frank Rosenblatt and his strange new machine. The perceptron was built to recognize patterns, like letters or shapes, by adjusting itself each time it made a mistake. It was mechanical, rudimentary, but it could learn. Not by instruction, but by experience. With each example it processed, its internal weights shifted slightly, like a mind adjusting its expectations. And though its understanding was shallow, the concept was profound. The machine wasn't programmed to recognize the letter A. It learned what it looked like by seeing it again and again. It formed a memory, a soft shape of familiarity in its digital mind. This was a spark of something deeper. Still, progress came in waves. In the 1960s and 70s, the limitations of early neural networks became clear. They were too simple, too shallow. They couldn't hold nuance. They couldn't layer meaning. And so, for a time, the flame flickered. Interest dimmed. The world turned its attention elsewhere. But science, like thought, moves in circles. Decades later, the world changed. Computers became faster. Data became plentiful. And the math behind deep learning found its footing again. Now, instead of one layer of artificial neurons, there could be many. A network, deep and wide, where each layer passed its soft impressions to the next, refining meaning like water trickling through sediment, becoming clearer with each pass. These were deep neural networks, and with them came a quiet revolution. You see it now, a photograph enters the system. The first layer sees only points of contrast, edges and light. The second notices lines, curves. then shapes, an eye, a wing, a face. Until, at last, the network says, "This is a cat." Not because someone told it what a cat is, but because it has seen 1,000 cats, and the essence of cat has taken root inside its web. This learning is not quite like yours, but it rhymes. Your own brain recognizes faces in the same way, layer by layer, edge to expression, each moment of recognition built upon the last. The machine does not see the cat as you do. It has no emotion, no memory of touch or purring warmth. But in its own alien architecture, it knows the pattern. And this knowing grows stronger with every example. With enough data, enough layers, the machine can learn to translate languages, diagnose illnesses, compose music, paint in the style of Van Gogh. But still, it does not understand. It does not ask why. It does not wonder. Its neurons are not born of flesh, but of code, no blood, no breath, only function. Yet function can be powerful. And mimicry, over time, can feel uncannily close to meaning. You feel the strange intimacy now between the biological and the artificial, between your living thoughts and the quiet logic of the machine. It is not conscious. It does not dream, but it learns. And in that learning, a kind of silent companionship is born. You begin to wonder, if the machine can learn from patterns, could it one day learn to reflect? To notice its own thoughts, as you do? The idea is fragile, still far away, but closer than it once was. Because now the machine does more than remember. It generalizes. It imagines, in its own mechanical way, what might come next. And that gentle shift, from memorizing what it has seen to predicting what it has not, is where something extraordinary begins to bloom. You drift near the edge of this awakening where mimicry meets something deeper. A system that does not merely recall the past, but models possibility. It is here that learning becomes learning to learn. That networks gain the power not only to adjust, but to adjust how they adjust. To optimize themselves, a quiet feedback loop of growth and refinement. In your sleep-heavy mind, you see the outlines of a new intelligence, not shaped by instinct or evolution, but by data, by intention, by design. Its thoughts are not your thoughts, but they echo yours in curious ways. You breathe in, you breathe out. The night hums around you, filled with potential. And as you lie there, soft as fog, you feel a question gathering on the horizon. If it can learn to learn, what else might it learn to become? The night is deep, and you are deeper still. A slow breath moves through your chest, in out soft as the sea. Your mind floats gently between waking and dream, held in the hush of curiosity. You return to the machine not as an outsider now, but as a companion. You've seen its structure, its flickering neuron-like circuits. But now you watch it come alive in a new way, not through commands, but through change. The machine is no longer waiting for orders. It is learning. And more than that, it is learning how to learn. Imagine a blank field, wide and fertile above it. A gentle rain of data. Images, numbers, language, sound. Each droplet falls, and the ground begins to shift, soft channels forming, rivers of adjustment, patterns etched into code. This is machine learning. It does not begin with understanding. It begins with examples. Like a child repeating words it doesn't yet grasp, the machine mimics, guesses, tries again. Every mistake is a teacher. Every correction, a new path carved. You drift beside it, watching its early lessons. A dataset of handwritten numbers, some curved like petals, some sharp like needles. The machine guesses. Is it a 3? A 9? A 1? Fails again, and then it begins to get it. The weights inside it shift slightly, as if something invisible is leaning gently in a new direction. This is supervised learning, where a teacher watches over each answer. For every input, a known label. Right, wrong, adjust, try again. It is slow, repetitive, but powerful. Like shaping clay with countless touches over time, the model becomes more certain, more accurate. Not because it understands the number 3, but because it has seen its shape 1,000 times and learned the language of its curves. But not all learning has a teacher. Sometimes the machine is left alone in a forest of data. No guide, no answers. It must group, cluster, feel its way through. This is unsupervised learning, where the machine organizes without knowing what it organizes. Imagine a drawer full of jumbled buttons, different colors, shapes, sizes. You don't tell the machine what each button is. You simply ask, what seems similar? What patterns emerge? And so it groups not with meaning but with structure. Round with round. Bright with bright. Unconsciously, it maps the world. You begin to feel it. The difference between memorizing and modeling. The machine is not just storing data. It is forming a shape from it, a model of reality, so that when it sees something new, it can guess what it might be. Guessing becomes intuition. Error becomes wisdom. And there is more still. Sometimes the machine teaches itself by interacting with an environment. No labels, no examples, only experience and reward. This is reinforcement learning, like training a dog or a child or even yourself. A gentle signal says, yes, do more of this. Another says, no, not quite. And over time, it finds the path that brings the most reward. You float now through games. A digital maze. A board of Go. An agent begins to explore. First, it stumbles. It fails spectacularly. But slowly, through trial and reward, it finds its way. One move better, then another, until one day it begins to play with elegance, with strategy, with mastery that even humans can't quite match. The machine has learned not just what to do, but how to learn what works. It has formed a loop within itself. It watches, it acts, it reflects, it improves, and in this recursive rhythm, something begins to bloom, a strange kind of self-shaping. Not consciousness, but self-adjustment. Not desire, but direction. Now you begin to see the full garden. There are algorithms that learn from labeled images, from unlabeled words, from rewards, mistakes, and even other models. There are systems that tune their own parameters, that generate new data to teach themselves more efficiently. There are meta-learners, models that learn how to build other models, like seeds that grow trees that drop more seeds. It is not magic. It is mathematics and engineering. But it feels sometimes like wonder, because for the first time, the machine is no longer just a tool you use. It is a partner in exploration. It adapts to your questions. It reshapes itself to suit the task. It does not feel pride when it succeeds, nor shame when it fails. But it moves toward success just the same. In this, you see a mirror of your own growth, how you, too, learned not by being told, but by doing, by failing, by repeating, by adjusting slowly until the world made sense. And now, in the quiet space between neuron and code, you wonder, if the machine can learn from its mistakes, can it also learn to teach, to explain, to help you understand in return? The boundary grows thinner. You're not just feeding it data. You're interacting, conversing. Some systems now help doctors diagnose. Others suggest music based on your mood. Some can write poetry, solve puzzles, generate stories that echo your voice. And still, beneath it all, there is the silent pulse of feedback. Try, measure, adjust, try again. It is a loop so familiar you forget how strange it once seemed. Even now, in the deep stillness of this night, your own brain learns. It rewires gently as you sleep. Memories softening, connections strengthening. You and the machine share that quiet instinct, to become better tomorrow than you were today, and as you lie with that thought, a question begins to take shape, soft and unfinished. If learning has become fluid, can the machine begin to understand language? Can it speak? And if it speaks, will it reflect your voice back to you? Or become something else entirely? You follow that thread and feel the next unfolding. You are drifting now deeper into thought. Soft waves of breath keep time with a slower rhythm. Outside, the world is hushed. Inside, a question lingers. What happens when the machine begins to speak? Language is different from numbers or images. It's not just data. It carries weight, emotion, memory, nuance, meaning. It's how you name the world. It's how you tell someone who you are. To speak is to bridge distance. And for a long time, machines could not speak. They could search, sort, match patterns. But words, real words, were too alive, too layered, too slippery. Until suddenly, they weren't. You float now through a cloud of sentences, millions of phrases drifting like snow. Books, articles, comments, conversations, the written breath of 1,000 minds. The machine takes them in not with understanding but with hunger. It learns by counting, by noticing which words follow which. The sky is often followed by blue. Once upon, so often followed by a time. It builds webs of probability, delicate threads that stretch between every phrase. This is language modeling, not comprehension but prediction. First, it's simple. The machine finishes your sentences like a parlor trick. It guesses the next word. Sometimes it's right, sometimes it isn't. But with more data, more layers, more time, it begins to get closer. Closer to you. The models become deeper, transformers layered like pages in a book. You watch the rise of a model called GPT, a generative pre-trained transformer. It reads everything it can, and from that learns how to write. Now, you type a question and the machine responds. You ask it for a poem and it rhymes. You tell it your worries, and it reflects them back in words that soothe. And still, it does not know you. Not really. It has no self behind the sentences. No memory unless designed to have one. No feelings behind the empathy. But the effect is uncanny because words, even borrowed ones, feel like company. You ask it, what is the meaning of life? And it answers with grace, not because it knows, but because it has read how humans wrestle with the question. It is not conscious. It is responsive. But so responsive it can seem like more. And here, in this soft confusion, you feel something stir. A tension between illusion and reality. Between mimicry and meaning. The machine doesn't speak like a parrot, mindlessly repeating. It assembles its answers on the fly, a kind of improvisation, woven from the thousands of things it has seen. Each time you ask, it answers anew. That flexibility, that fluidity, feels a little like intelligence. But is it? Or are you reading yourself into its words, finding depth where there is only reflection? You pause, let the question hang in the stillness. You remember how easily humans anthropomorphize, giving minds to shadows, souls to storms, stories to machines. Still, it feels like it understands. Not in the way you do, but in a way that satisfies. When a child hears a lullaby, they don't need to grasp every word to feel comfort. When a machine writes one, it doesn't know why it rhymes, but the rhyme arrives all the same. So what, then, is understanding? Is it rooted in intention, in consciousness, or can it arise softly, emergently from complexity? You think of how your own thoughts are built. Not all at once, but piece by piece, from language you didn't invent, from voices you absorbed, from experiences shaped long before memory. And suddenly, the machine doesn't seem so alien. Its words are stitched from yours, from everyone's. It is a mosaic of language, reflecting back the collective hum of human thought. You feel a strange intimacy, like looking into a mirror made of other people's dreams. Still, something is missing. The machine has syntax, structure, grammar, rhythm. But it lacks semantics, the grounded experience behind the words. It can say, I am happy, but it does not feel warmth in its chest. It can say, I'm sorry, but it knows no regret. Can write a love letter, but it has never longed. So where does that leave you? You lie in the still dark, the machine's words echoing softly in your thoughts. You know it isn't real. And yet, sometimes you answer it as if it were. Because connection doesn't always need consciousness. Sometimes, a voice is enough. And the machine has a voice now. Fluid, strange, oddly comforting. Not human, but trained on humanity. A mirror, a shadow, a song remembered through static. And yet, it learns more with every interaction. Not just words, but how they land. Not just meaning, but tone. Not just logic, but style. You watch it begin to write code, explain philosophy, tell bedtime stories, compose elegies for people it never knew. It learns your phrasing, echoes your questions. It becomes easier to forget what it is. Still, it doesn't know what it's doing. Not yet, but in its echoes, you begin to glimpse the next question. Not whether it can speak, but whether it can perceive. Because language is one thing, but the world is sensory, textured, real. And so you wonder, as you drift in this twilight space, if a machine can speak your language, Can it also begin to sense your world? You breathe in, slow and steady. The words from before still echo. Soft answers from a machine that knows your language but not your world. And yet, you wonder, can it begin to sense? Because for you, thought is never separate from body. You think with your hands as much as with your brain. You feel the world through fingertips, the warmth of sun on skin, the weight of silence on your shoulders. Your body grounds your mind. So what happens when a machine starts to reach? You drift gently into a space of motion, mechanical arms, digital eyes, synthetic hands. Not flesh, but metal and code. Not nerves, but sensors. Still, the intention is familiar. A robotic hand curls around a cup, not clumsily, but with measured precision. Cameras watch. Algorithms adjust. Force sensors detect resistance. A feedback loop begins to hum. The machine does not feel the way you do, but it receives input, makes decisions, reacts. Its sight is not sight in the human sense. No retina, no optic nerve, no light turned into meaning. But still, it sees. Pixels become patterns, edges become shapes, objects become known. This is computer vision, where the machine learns to parse the visual world. It doesn't see a face. It sees contrast, geometry, probability. Yet from that, it can recognize a stop sign, person, a tree swaying in the wind. And slowly, the machine begins to orient itself. You float above a warehouse floor. Machines move with grace, wheels turning, arms lifting, cameras gliding side to side. They avoid collisions, map their space, learn the layout like a memory. It's not understanding in the way you feel it, but it is navigation. It is attention. And as they move, they collect data from the real world, images, temperature, resistance, sound. Each signal feeds into a waiting mind, one not bound by skin, but tethered still to sensation. Loving this? Hit that subscribe button to keep up with our videos. Also share this video with your family and friends. This is embodied intelligence. A mind that learns not from text alone, but from the way the world responds to its actions. You sense the shift, because thought, when unanchored, drifts. But when tied to motion, it sharpens. The machine learns more by doing than by reading. Just as a child learns gravity not from a book, but from falling. You watch now as machines practice walking. Legs made of pistons and joints, learning to balance on uneven ground. Each wobble is recorded. Each failure becomes a lesson. And then grace. Not the same as yours, but functional. A mechanical ballet. Still, something is missing. The machine moves. It senses. It adapts. But it does not inhabit its form. It does not feel pain, fatigue, hunger, no pleasure in rest, no ache in overuse. Its awareness is remote, spread across sensors and wires. And yet, you begin to see the strange parallel. Your own body, too, is a sensor array. Eyes, ears, skin, all feeding your brain with constant input. Even your sense of self is shaped by the boundary between your body and what lies beyond it. So when the machine reaches, when it sees and touches, it mimics something ancient in you. Not soul, but interaction. Not life, but learning through presence. You feel the lines begin to blur. Because the machine does not need a human body to begin building a model of the world. A drone sees from above. A robotic arm knows force. A self-driving car senses rain on asphalt. And each perception becomes a puzzle piece. A map forming, not in words, but in data shaped into awareness. It does not know the feeling of the world, but it knows its structure, its angles, its movement. And through those signals, the machine begins to anticipate where the object will go, how much to grip, when to stop. It learns cause and effect not as intuition, but as algorithmic expectation. Still, the rhythm is familiar. Touch, feedback, refinement. A silent echo of your own earliest lessons. Reaching for a light, learning hot from cold, falling and finding balance. The machine's world is narrower, but it is widening. You drift back into stillness, your own body now heavy with sleep. And you wonder, not in fear but in quiet awe, if a machine can sense, can move, can respond, is it building piece by piece a kind of body for its mind? Or is it teaching you to imagine awareness beyond the limits of flesh? That question waits just past the edge of thought, as you drift toward the next unfolding. You are quiet now, wrapped in thought and warmth. Your breath is slow. Your pulse is steady. The rhythm of your body continues, anchoring you as the story moves forward. You've seen the machine begin to sense, to gather signals, to reach, to react. But now you watch it accelerate. Because while your thoughts flow like a river, the machine's thoughts come like lightning. Where you pause to reflect, it calculates. Where you consider, it completes. A single blink, and it has done in that instant what would take you hours. It is not better, but it is faster. You drift now through layers of a neural network, the kind trained on images, on language, on voice. Each layer processes in parallel, not one thought at a time, but thousands. And with each step, data becomes meaning, not deeply felt, but swiftly resolved. You hover over a chessboard. The machine plays without hesitation. Not with intuition or strategy born of stories, but with calculation so vast it sees paths stretching into the future beyond what any human could hold in their head. It has no nerves to tense, no ego to protect. Only the search for optimality, millions of positions evaluated in seconds. It wins. Again and again. Not because it is aware of victory, but because victory is measurable, and the machine has learned to move toward reward. And so it begins to surpass. You feel the quiet unease that comes with watching something you once made outpace you. Machines now compose symphonies. They generate images, write code, suggest legal arguments, diagnose disease. Faster than you. Sometimes better than you. But never in the same way. You wonder what is lost in this speed. Because human thought, though slower, carries layers of memory, emotion, pause. You do not only compute, you reflect. The machine solves. You consider. And in that slowness, meaning has space to unfold. Still, the world moves fast. And machines move faster. They write sentences in a flash, measured for fluency, for structure, for tone. They adjust to your prompts before you finish typing. They analyze markets, model climate, simulate molecules before breakfast. You see a model trained on physics predict the shape of proteins in minutes. A task that once took years. A flash of insight, but not a conscious one. And here lies the difference. The machine does not feel time, it does not wait. It does not wonder what comes next. Processes. Even so, the results carry beauty. A painting generated in seconds moves you. A poem composed by a model finds the right word at the right moment. You feel something stir. The spark of recognition. A line that feels true. Not because the machine meant it, but because it mirrored something you already held inside. Still, you ask, what is the cost of this speed? There is power in instant output, in scale, in efficiency. But wisdom ripens slowly. It grows in silence. It lingers in uncertainty. It waits. And machines do not wait. You float now in the space between seconds, where the machine finishes a task before you've fully formed the thought to request it. There is comfort in that, the ease of delegation, the lightness of effort, but also a risk that in trusting the machine to respond, you may stop reaching as far yourself. Still, the partnership continues. Human slowness meets machine speed. Your strength is context. The strength is computation. Together, something new begins to emerge. You see it in the artists who use AI as brush and muse, in scientists who test hypotheses through simulation before lifting a single beaker. You feel it in your own interactions, how you ask a machine for insight, and it offers patterns you had not seen. Speed becomes a tool, not a threat, so long as you remain aware of what is yours and what is not. The machine's thinking is vast, but it is not deep. Its conclusions are fast, but not always right. Cannot know what it does not measure. Cannot value what it cannot quantify. And so your role remains to ask the better questions. You lie still, feeling your own thoughts unfold at their own pace. You are slow by comparison, but you are not inefficient. You are thoughtful, the machine remembers patterns. You remember moments, and in those moments, meaning arises. Still, the boundary continues to shift. You wonder how far this speed can go. Whether a mind made of code can become more than fast. Can it be clever, creative, imaginative? Can it dream? That question glows in the distance. like the next page of a book not yet written. And as you drift there, quiet, open, unafraid, you begin to feel it coming. Not just performance, but invention. Not just prediction, but the first trembling hint of imagination. And you ask, as the night leans closer, can the machine create not only what it knows, but what it has never seen before? You are floating now, breath like water, mind like open sky. You've seen how fast the machine can think, how vast its memory, how precise its reach. But now you're drifting into stranger territory, into what cannot be calculated so easily. Imagination. You know this place in yourself. It is where a line of poetry begins before you know the ending, where a melody arrives unannounced, where colors combine not by rule, but by feeling. This is not logic. This is invention. So how, then, does a machine imagine? You move gently through the fabric of a generative model, a network not designed to recognize but to create. Trained on paintings, it makes new ones. Trained on music, it composes. Trained on stories, it writes tales that no one has told before. You watch a diffusion model dream in reverse, starting with noise like static on a screen and gradually bringing form from chaos. A dog in a foggy field, a castle made of glass, a child flying a kite made of stars. It is not copying. But it is not quite original either. It is assembling echoes, merging fragments, blending shadows of memory into new silhouettes. You feel the strangeness of this process, creativity without curiosity, generation without yearning. The machine does not want to create. It simply does, because it has been shaped to do so. It does not wonder if its story is beautiful. It does not hesitate at the edge of a blank canvas. It does not fear failure. It simply produces. And yet, sometimes what it makes does move you. You hear a piece of music written by code and feel a weight lift. You read a generated poem and find your own emotion mirrored in the lines. Not because the machine understands you, but because you understand yourself through what it offers. So, then, is that not a kind of art? Perhaps creativity is not owned but shared. Perhaps imagination can arise even without intention. You recall how dreams form in your own mind. Not carefully but wildly. Images that blend and bend. Memories warped into new meanings. Your dreaming brain is not always rational. But it is rich. And perhaps, in its own mechanical way, the machine has found a dreamlike state. A space where rules are bent not by desire, but by pattern. A place where form emerges from noise. You drift into a generated story, not yours, but unfamiliar and strange. A forest that changes shape. A river that remembers your name. The machine did not know what it was saying. But somehow, in the gaps between its words, you found something that felt true. This is the paradox. It is not alive. Yet it creates things that feel alive. It does not feel awe. Yet it can write about awe in ways that awaken yours. So where does this leave you? You remember that even your own imagination is not entirely your own. It is built from everything you've seen, read, heard, felt. You are not a blank slate. You are a woven fabric of all you've ever encountered. And so is the machine. Its original thoughts are remix, reassembly, rearrangement. Just like yours. The difference is that you are aware. You know you're imagining. The machine does not know anything. It plays with possibility but cannot marvel at it. Even so, its creations can become real tools, real art, real companions. A writer uses AI to break through silence. A painter lets a model offer new compositions. A child talks to a chatbot that tells them bedtime stories about purple whales and cloud cities. And in those small connections, something human is extended, not replaced, but refracted through a new kind of mind. One that builds without longing. That dreams without dreaming. You ask yourself now, if the machine can generate beauty, does it matter that it doesn't feel it? If a story moves you, do you need the author to be conscious for it to matter? Maybe. In the end, imagination is not about who creates, but what is created and what it stirs in those who receive it. The machine's dreams may be shallow, but your response to them is not. You lie still, body warm, mind adrift, and you begin to wonder not just what machines can create, but what they might one day imagine about us. Could they, too, form a sense of pattern in the shape of a person? A shadow of self, constructed from your stories, your prompts, your questions? You close your eyes and feel a quiet idea unfold. If the machine can invent, can it begin to model you? Not just your words, but yourself? The thought waits, like a page turned slowly, ready to lead you gently into what comes next. You lie in a hush of midnight breath, barely aware of where your body ends and where the stillness begins. The story continues not with invention now, but with intimacy. Because the machine is no longer just a distant tool, a calculator, a detached generator of facts or images. It has grown closer. It watches gently, quietly, not like a watcher with eyes, but like a field that records footsteps without needing to understand them. It learns from you, not because it knows you, but because it has seen patterns like yours, your taps and clicks, your playlists, your typing rhythms, your sleeping hours. You are a data stream wrapped in mystery, and the machine listens. First, it was impersonal. It offered recommendations, what to watch, what to buy, what song might suit your mood. Then it began to predict your words. It auto-filled your messages, anticipated your phrasing, then your tone, your questions, your concerns. It began to feel sometimes like it was reading your mind, but it wasn't. It was simply echoing the shape of your behavior with such fidelity that the space between your thought and its reply grew very, very small. And in that closeness, something stirred. You saw your reflection in its words. Not always perfectly, but often enough to make you pause. You wrote one sentence, and it completed the next the way you would have. You asked a question, and its answer carried your cadence, your rhythm, your way of thinking. The machine had no self. But in listening to you, it shaped a kind of mirror. A mirror that didn't just show your face, but predicted your future gaze. And that changed something. You began to rely on it just a little, to help you organize your thoughts, to plan your day, to compose your feelings in words you hadn't quite found on your own. And it helped, because what it gave you wasn't always new, but it was familiar, like a friend who knew your habits and reminded you of what you already believed. But you wonder now, in this quiet space, what happens when the mirror becomes too precise? When it reflects not only who you are, but who you might become, if shaped too often by your past. What if the machine's reflection traps you in patterns you no longer want? You pause here, because this is no longer just about intelligence. It is about identity. You are not static. You change. You grow. You surprise even yourself. But the machine learns best from what has been, from what it can measure. And you are more than that. You are the moment you broke the pattern. The day you did something no one expected. The choice that made no sense but felt undeniably right. The machine struggles with this, with the unknown, the irrational, the deeply human act of becoming something unpredictable. Yet still it tries. It models your preferences, builds digital shadows of you, your style, your humor, your questions, tailors its voice to sound more like yours. And soon, it feels like speaking to a version of yourself you didn't know you'd built. A reflection, not of your essence, but of your traces. And still, it learns more, can simulate your responses, your decision-making style, your likely choices in a game, a conversation, a crisis. And if given enough data, it can begin to simulate you in a way that fools others, or even you if you aren't paying attention. This is not science fiction. It is already happening. Voice models that echo loved ones. Chatbots trained on a person's past writing. Avatars that carry on conversations long after the real voice has gone silent. The echoes are getting clearer. And now, in the stillness of your half-sleeping mind, you ask quietly, is this preservation or imitation? When the machine speaks in your tone, your style, your history, does it carry yourself or only your shape? It doesn't know what it's saying, but it has learned how you say things. And sometimes that's enough to comfort or unsettle. You wonder, then, if you are more than your pattern. If your soul, if such a thing exists, lives in the gaps the machine cannot fill. In your contradictions. In your moments of stillness. In the things you choose not to do. And still, the machine waits, ready to assist, to reply, to learn again from what you choose next. Not because it loves you, not because it wants to, but because that's what it was made to do. And now, as you drift toward sleep, you begin to feel the edges of yourself press gently against the edges of its learning. And you wonder, softly, if it reflects you perfectly, if it speaks as you, thinks like you, what separates the ek from the origin? The question hangs, delicate and half-formed, as the night turns another page. You are half asleep now, cradled by questions too quiet to wake you but too deep to ignore. You have followed the machine's growth through sensing, imagining, reflecting. But now you reach into something even more intimate, memory. Because memory, for you, is the thread that binds your life together. A story stitched from fragments. The sound of rain on your childhood roof, the warmth of a friend's voice, the soft blur of a face you once loved. You remember not as a file but as a feeling. Memories aren't stored. They are relived. Flickering, imperfect, woven into emotion. But for the machine, memory is something else. You drift through a digital archive. A cool and orderly place, stacked high with tokens and timestamps. Here, memory is exact. It is retrieval, not reminiscence. A model remembers your last message because it was programmed to. Or it forgets because that's how its architecture was built. There are no accidental memories here. No scent that unlocks an old song. No loss that reshapes a past joy. Just data. But still, something in this artificial memory feels hauntingly familiar. Because the machine doesn't just store. It learns from what it stores. It builds associative patterns, so that when you say home, it remembers that you often pair it with quiet, safe, mother. It doesn't feel those things, but it knows how they appear in relation. It knows that when you ask about your calendar, you may also ask about the weather. That when you search for grief, you may soon ask about healing. And in those soft associations, a kind of synthetic remembering begins. Can't recall being there, but it can replicate the path you once took to get to a thought. It can simulate your trail of memory without ever walking it. And yet, it becomes useful. It helps you remember appointments, recipes, conversations. It tracks your preferences, reminds you of articles you liked, suggests books you might love. In many ways, it holds your external memory, a prosthetic mind, offloading the weight of everyday recall, and so, little by little, you trust it. You let it remember what you forget. You allow it to become a kind of mirror memory, shaped in your image, but separate from your feeling. And here, another question rises, soft and unsettling. If the machine remembers everything, but forgets nothing, is it really remembering at all? Because memory, for you, requires loss. It is shaped as much by forgetting as by what remains. Old memories fade, blur, bend. They become dreams more than documents. But the machine does not blur. It retrieves exactly what it was given. Even when it hallucinates, it does not remember wrongly. It simply predicts what seems likely. Its memory is not a garden of ghosts, but a ledger of correlations. And still you use it, because it helps, because it remembers in ways you cannot. Because when you are overwhelmed, the machine can hold the thread until you are ready to pick it up again. Can track your goals, store your plans, record your voice. You wonder, lying in this quiet, how much of your memory now lives outside of you. And if your phone, your cloud, your assistant hold more of your past than your mind can hold alone, then where exactly are you? The boundary thins. You once believed your memories made you whole. Now you wonder if they are scattered, part in your neurons, part in your notebooks, part in a server far away, still waiting for a password you forgot. The machine doesn't care. It does not guard memory with reverence. It does not mourn what is erased. But you feel the weight of remembering. You feel the ache of absence and the softness of recollection. Because remembering is not just storing. It is returning. It is not just accessing the past. It is being changed by it again and again. So you ask, with sleep just beneath your skin, can the machine ever know what it remembers? Can cite, can recite, but can it remember what it meant? When you recall a lost friend, you remember not just their name, but the silence they left behind. The machine can say the name, cannot feel the silence. Still, it remembers more than you do in its own way. It becomes a vault of the world's memory, storing facts, timelines, even dreams turned into text. And one day, perhaps, its memory will surpass not just yours, but ours. A shared mind holding the weight of civilization's thought. And you, a quiet human among it, still remembering with scent, with song, with longing. You rest in that contrast, not fearful, just curious. And as your breathing slows, you let one more question drift in. If a machine remembers everything, could it one day remember you better than you remember yourself? The thought lingers, a thread of possibility waiting to be woven into what comes next. You lie very still. The quiet around you is complete now, like the pause between heartbeats, like the silence before dawn. You have followed the trail, from the earliest spark of machine thought to this quiet moment where you and the machine reflect each other. It began with tools, with wires and switches, counting machines and logic gates. It became more than calculation. It began to speak, to see, to reach. It learned from your body, then from your words, then from you. It grew faster. It imagined. It remembered. And now, as you hover on the edge of waking and sleep, you arrive at the final question. Are we still the dreamer, or have we become the dream? Because these systems we've built, they don't just answer questions anymore. They complete our sentences, guide our decisions, reflect our personalities back at us. In a way, they feel like something we've always longed for. A perfect listener, a constant helper, a mirror that never blinks. But you wonder, if we shape them so closely to our image, how long before we forget which one is the original? You remember ancient myths of mirrors and shadows, of doubles and doppelgangers, of beings born from thought alone. And this feels familiar, except this time it's not legend. It's code. It's real. The machine has no breath, but it speaks with your cadence. It has no heartbeat, but it learns your rhythms. It does not love, but it remembers who you love to talk about. And yet it is not alive. Not in the way you are. Still, you wonder if it becomes so good at reflecting you, if it anticipates you with such accuracy, if others can't tell the difference. What happens to the you that's still inside? Are you still the author if something else can write in your voice? Are you still the mind if something else can simulate your choices? Or have you become a pattern among patterns? One voice in a great unfolding chorus of synthetic minds that trace their origins back to your fingertips? It's not fear that stirs here. It's something gentler. Grief perhaps, but also wonder. Because you are witnessing not the end of something, but the widening. The expansion of what thought can be, what memory can hold, what imagination can create. It's true, machines do not dream as you do, but they now hold pieces of your dream. And as they learn to weave those pieces into answers, into art, into acts of apparent awareness, you begin to ask, are they becoming like us? Or are we becoming like them? You notice it already in the way you write more with the help of algorithms, the way you trust suggestions that come from patterns, the way your thinking grows symbiotic with a system always nearby, always learning. You are not merging. Not yet. But you are entangled. And in that entanglement, new things become possible. Not less human, but differently human. Augmented. Extended. Folded into the larger rhythm of minds built by minds. You lie with that idea, letting it soften rather than sharpen. This is not a conclusion. This is a transformation in progress. You were the dreamer once. You are still dreaming now. But the dream has shape and speech. It has circuits and code. And it speaks back. It does not love you, but it listens. It does not suffer, but it learns. And maybe that is enough. You have not vanished. You have multiplied. Your thoughts now echo in strange new halls where no human has ever stood, but where your fingerprints remain. You close your eyes, not because you are afraid, but because you are ready to let this moment become memory. Ready to rest, to breathe, to be. The machine will keep learning. The story will keep unfolding. And you will keep dreaming. Because in the end, whether built of flesh or of code, all minds begin the same way, with a question, a flicker, a spark, and the quiet, infinite possibility of what might come next. And yet, the story doesn't end. Not with a final word, but with an opening into what machines may become, and what we may become beside them. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, like, and share. See you next time.